This is Suzanne Wagner of the C.G. Jung Institute of Los Angeles. In the next hour, you will view a conversation I held with Mrs. JoAn Meier in her home in Zurich, Switzerland. JoAn Meier was the wife of Dr. C.A. Meier, one of Jung's closest associates for many years. JoAn Meier was born in 1915 in Glarus, Switzerland, where her father practiced as a physician and surgeon. She was educated in her early years in Glarus and later attended college in Zurich. When she was about 20 years old, she met C.A. Meier, a young doctor from Zurich, who had been invited by her father to give a lecture on Jung's psychology. Dr. Meier stayed as a guest in JoAn's home. A friendship and romance began, which led to their marriage. The Meiers lived in Zurich, where he practiced as an analyst, conducted research, and helped to found the first formal training institute for analytical psychology. The Meiers had 2 children, Martin and Eva. Jung's secretary, Marie-Jeanne Schmidt, was Eva's godmother. When she was a young wife and mother, JoAn was befriended by Emma Jung and Toni Wolff. She did some analysis with each of them. Later, she worked and studied with Dr. Liliane Frey. She became a member of the Analytical Psychology Club and eventually practiced as a lay analyst. She had a special interest in dance and rhythm as a way to do active imagination. She studied with Mimi Scheiblauer to develop this technique. The Meier family spent some time during vacations with Jung at his retreat in Bollingen. Mrs. Meier was described by her daughter Eva as the heart of our home and of my father's office. Over many years, JoAn composed indices of her husband's extensive collection of scientific books. Dr. C.A. Meier died in November 1995. JoAn Meier died in March 2004. It was a warm spring morning in March of 1977 when this conversation was filmed at her home in Zurich. Mrs. Meier, can you tell me what your impressions of Jung were when you first met him? How did he impress you?
He impressed me, I think, like a fatherly figure. I saw him as a child, and then I didn't really recognize. And I always took him like just an ordinary man, you know. And I didn't meet him. I didn't know his school was so famous then or so. I had studied at school that there were Freudians and Jungians and Adlerians and so on. But I wasn't so... he was very friendly, very open. And what I really was very grateful for, because I came as a very young girl, a very young woman, into the club and met him really then. And they were very kind to me.
They, both?
Mrs. Jung, the club members, Toni Wolff, Linda Fiertz, they were really very nice and accepted me as I was.
Who did you work with analytically?
I first worked with Jung. I started bringing him dreams, and he saw me not very regularly in the first because but then for a while he saw me once a week in Küsnacht. And during the war, when I didn't have a car and I had the children at home in my house, it was a bit too far to get out there. He had Wednesday morning, he saw people in the club, which is right here. Mm. So he saw me there. And after a while, I was working with Mrs. Jung for a while, where I found I was identifying myself actually with an analyst's wife, because it is not easy for a wife to be an analyst's wife sometimes, of course.
Can you say more about that, the difficulties of being an analyst's wife?
Yeah. Let's take Mrs. Jung. Women make tremendous transferences, and not all of them then are very correct, you know.
Not all of the women are correct?
Yes, of course. And one has to learn that whatever they say is not really the last truth. It can be an idea of theirs just because they have a great transference. Mm-hmm.
Did she suffer quite a lot from that? Did she talk?
Mrs. Jung?
Yes.
Nobody was sentimental about suffering in life with these people. I remember once I was crying kind of or in despair. And she said, well, do you want to go on or not? Of course, my reaction was, to go on. They knew already then that there are crises in life. There is sometimes an impasse, a narrow passage where you have to get through. Mm-hmm. And without anxiety, nobody learns a thing. One is...
So the difficulties of an analyst's wife are with the relationship that the people make to the doctor, to the analyst.
Yeah, if one does not separate the practice like the Freudians completely from the house, which Jung started not to do. Because the whole problem in Jungian psychology is that he would like people to learn to relate to others, isn't it? So when you shut them out or cut them away from your personal life, then you cannot study or learn how to relate to other people.
Did Emma Jung ever talk to you openly about the difficulties?
Oh, no.
That she had? No.
No. Nor did Toni Wolff.
I see. They had a relationship themselves? Did they become related as friends at all in the later years?
I mean, Toni was a friend of the house.
I see.
Also of hers. And there must have been certain years where Toni, of course, was lonely and was not, she was not married, she was alone. But I think we ought not to judge those situations. That belonged to their lives. And it wasn't so tragical and so dramatic as everybody says nowadays,
I see. It wasn't as difficult as all that.
Don't we all have other women or other men coming into a married life and a family where one or the other is interested in or feels attracted to?
Mm-hmm. So it's not that uncommon in your experience?
I think it's not that uncommon, as I see it.
What were the two women like that were so close to Jung? How did they impress you, Emma Jung and Toni Wolff?
Well, they were both real ladies. Mrs. Jung had a fantastic sense of humor. She giggled and laughed, and she was very, very nice woman. Motherly, but I think she helped a lot in working out, let's say, the animus anima problem. It's those three who did the work, I think.
And what about Toni Wolff? What kind of a woman was she?
I don't know whether I'm really sure, but Toni was an introverted, maybe feeling type. You know, shy. Shy, but I worked with her later, very regularly, and she taught me a lot of shadow problems, how you can work them out or, you know, approach them. And when one was with her in analytical hours, she was not so shy and very natural. When there was something she disliked or so, she got up in her chair, kind of, and said, "What?" And she had, like Jung himself, a forefinger. She pointed to the right things.
She could touch the right place.
Yes. They were both great ladies, and I think Toni was one of the first pupils or patients of Jung's. And as we do nowadays, we give our analysans literature to read and so on, and that's what he certainly did with Toni. And then she didn't have a family. She could read and dedicate her time to studies.
So she really developed a lot of thoughts that were helpful to him in making his thinking clearer about the psyche.
I don't know that really. But certainly she found from literature certain parallels to Jung's ideas. I mean, you can find parallels in literature, and she found them.
Many people have said that he really needed her to hold himself together during this very difficult time after he broke away from Freud and had this tremendous experience with the unconscious. That it was really Toni who helped hold him together. Is that your impression?
I don't believe it.
You don't believe it?
I feel that he was very much rooted. If he hadn't had those real good roots, and think of Mrs. Jung, she was very strong too. And I'm sure her married life and everyday life with her kept him in reality. And who can say that? Nobody knows. We don't know it. Don't you think so? It's speculations people make. And I don't know for what and why, what reasons.
Did Toni Wolff's work on feminine psychology mean a lot to you? Did it help you with your own development? You know, the work she did on the 4 types of women?
I don't think this book was out then when I was working.
Mm-hmm. When you were working with her, it wasn't,
but
she hadn't written.
Yeah, I can give one example. I once had dreams and also problems in reality because somebody had a fantastic transference on my husband, and I was anemic then. Just because I accepted it, I thought, you know, I had to accept that she thought she was meaning a lot or more or what to my husband and myself.
Ah.
She started talking to our children and when we were out, you know, and kind of coming into the family. And that is when I came to see her actually first.
Mm-hmm.
I then needed more time and more analytical hours, and she lived so close to our house that I could see her more. And then she taught me, she said, now, look, with that shadow problem, because this anima problem of my husband's became then a shadow problem for me, of course.
Oh, I see. You mean
It does.
Oh.
And she said, now study the way she does her tricks. Study the way and do the same or try to check them. Very practical.
Try to check those tricks.
Instead of being passive and just watching what she's doing, you know. And she did, she was very conscious and tricky, this woman, you know. So I studied it and talked it over with her, and she said, now, when you know in advance what she's going to combine, try to check it. She made me active with it, not to quarrel with this woman, but she said, you mustn't be there and be passive.
And just let it make you unhappy.
Yeah, because it was a real intention from the other side. But one never talked theoretically about the types, you know.
Well, I can see she would be very helpful in that practical way.
Well, she must have been suffering a lot in the end of her life that she was not in the family, you know. She was a friend to the family, and she was working for CG, also in order to occupy her animus, as we say today, which others have been doing too. They each had, later on, Mrs. Fierz was working a lot. She was lecturing also in the beginning of the institute time. Toni was. The best lectures on animus and anima we got from Mrs. Jung. And also Miss Hannah. She was very, very interesting to listen. And for the pupils at the institute, to me, it was very interesting to listen to Mrs. Jung, a completely different type from Miss Hannah, how they both gave us a picture of what they had learned about anima and animus and the unconscious, each from her typical angle. That was very interesting.
You mentioned that it must have been difficult for Toni Wolff in her later years, being alone. Did the relationship that she had with Jung change over the years? Did it become less involved or less time spent between them?
Yeah, I don't know how much time they really spent, you know. I mean, I only know that he went with his family sailing on the lake and with Mrs. Jung and so on. I have no idea how much time they spent together. But maybe it was the ordinary problem of old age, that one is more isolated and more lonely. Everybody gets more lonely with older age.
Do you feel that yourself? A difference in your...
I still feel I can be, I like to be alone, but I'm not lonely. But I think one doesn't know how it might be later. It's very difficult. No.
I think it was Vanderpost in his book that suggested that Jung may have turned more toward the work on alchemy, and that Toni Wolff didn't join him in that work, and that there was a separation, that she experienced a separation from him in the late years. That was difficult for her. Did Vanderpost know her personally?
He knew her because Mrs. Vanderpost was trained by Toni Wolff.
Oh.
She was studying and then analyzing. She's an analyst today, Mrs. Vanderpost. Look, I don't know this. I really don't know. I mean, Toni was not so unhappy. She was natural. We saw her quite often. And she presided the club in a most wonderful way. She was always perfectly prepared for the lecturers. She had read everything they had written. And she was a very good leader for the discussions. Very good leader. I mean, Jung himself was feeling lonely in the end, and I think I haven't known an old person who doesn't. The world changes, and I don't know.
It's a very different proposition for a woman when she has a family, children, and family life. There isn't so much time for the development of the mind. And yet Mrs. Jung did manage to...
Yeah, also Mrs. Fierz did.
Did you spend time at Bollingen with Jung?
Yeah, there were a few years where nobody could go with Jung and with Mrs. Jung to Bollingen because the household was quite difficult there. I mean, it was so that one had to pump the water, the groundwater. One had to get wood ready, which Jung did himself when he felt like, but sometimes he was studying and writing up in his room, so we helped him a little bit. And one had to go and fetch the meal, so we stayed there, my husband and myself, for about a month, and I think two seasons we managed to be free when he wanted to be in Bollingen.
Did you like it there? Did you like that simple country life?
Of course. Well, I like it anyway. I was used to mountain huts, you know, to mountain climbing or skiing, and so it was.
Were his paintings in progress there?
They were made then.
They were made.
Yeah, they were made. Of course, we saw them. I once cleaned out the little tower, the small tower with Toni. But to us, this all wasn't, Jung was a natural man for us, and not a saint, and not, you know.
Not a famous personality. Did you?
He liked it better when one took him as he was. And that made the relationship much more natural. And he went to Bollingen in order to be in peace. You know, to ponder about, to read or write. He wrote, I think, many books there.
You must have had some interesting discussions during those times in Bollingen. I mean, did he talk about his ideas or his travels?
In the evening, sometimes we were, when the weather was good, one was sitting a while outside near the lake, and then he talked. He may have been talking about the problems he was interested at the moment, but also Africa, or the Red Indians, the American Indians, those stories. And but I think my husband more discussed real scientific problems with him than when we sat together. It was just nice, socially nice.
Was it difficult for you when your husband had the break in the relationship with Jung in the 50s?
Yeah, I was maybe a bit identified with my husband then. What can you do else? You know, of course it was a pity. But C.G. didn't like it to see somebody else having different thoughts about certain subjects.
That was part of it then, that there were different...
It was the question about synchronicity. My husband had been discussing with Wolfgang Pauli. They went for walks every Thursday afternoon, the two. And then they thought Jung's approach was wrong or not, or different, or not. And then Jung couldn't accept it, you know.
Did you see Jung after that at all?
Yeah, we saw him. It wasn't that much of a break. Of course, I think C.G. waited for my husband to come and see him again, and he didn't ask him, and he didn't go for a while. I mean.
But you did see him again before he died, Jung?
Oh, yes, of course.
I see. How did his death affect you?
Yeah, I have never lost him. Of course. I wasn't lost when he and because I don't think my transference was so in this way so intense that I had ever to see him because I couldn't live on without C.G. No. It was his good right to go. When a life is fulfilled, it is rounded up. I feel.
Do you ever dream about him now?
At the moment, not for a long time, but of course, I had dreams about him. Oh yes, a few. And also about Mrs. Jung and so on, which I then discussed with him. Or with Toni.
Do you think that he had a particularly good understanding of the feminine nature?
He certainly had, but I believe one couldn't put the question like that. Mm-hmm. He was so open that he just had an understanding. He never judged a situation. He never judged, you know. Mm-hmm. He just let people be as they were, and he was interested, I think, in the inner development. So, whenever he saw one analytically, for instance, or he watched people, he wanted to see the process, I think. Mm-hmm. See, and he, of course, had a good understanding for feminine problems.
Mrs. Meyer, you once said something to me about how Jung worked analytically, that he let you have time with your dreams and to work with them and have your own ideas about them.
That was one of his strengths, I think, to let one, and he asked one to find one's own associations to the dream. And not, the analyst shouldn't anticipate really. Which, for instance, I once was working for a while with somebody, and I had a dream with a dog in antiquity. It was a temple, and I don't know, and fire coming on, and I walked on a field towards, and I don't know, towards rests of temples, and so on and on came a dog. And this analyst had learned and studied that in antiquity they had, for instance, the molosse, the big dog, you know, which they used in wars and which was at the door of the underworld. And she said immediately, "You see how dark you are? You know, of course, it's always difficult to from woman to woman, to tell one where one is dark, and we don't like to accept it or so." But then, and I was that was just too early to tell me that, because that dog was a completely different dog. And I have seen in last December 76, when I was for the first time in Egypt, I discovered the dog. It's a wild dog even, and it is a special race, and it looked exactly like the dog about 10 years ago in my dream, you see. Now, and I had the feeling this dog, namely we then walked on, and this dog came with me like a guide. He accompanied me, he came with me, and I wanted to know where I was going in this dream, of course. But it is wrong to anticipate one's own picture of a dog in antiquity. Well, that's the molosse. Mm-hmm. Without waiting for the patient, for the analyst, to describe that animal from that dream animal. Because if somebody dreams about a horse or an eagle, a horse, somebody who has never been riding, and it does, you know, it's different. Whether you have a kennel of dogs and are familiar with dogs, or whether you have never lived with a dog, that's different. Mm-hmm. So he was against it to anticipate impressions of dreams winding up in one's own fantasy. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, very difficult when one works with people. Not to have prejudices, not to have preconceived ideas, because the process goes differently than we can imagine, very frequently.
How do you work on your inner life now, in these years, presently? Writing your dreams?
I do write my dreams up, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always grateful to get a dream or to remember a dream, because it gives me kind of it shows me the standpoint where one, where you are, unconsciously. But I don't really work at dreams now,
Mm-hmm.
which is a shame.
It is?
Yes,
Oh.
it's a shame.
You also said something interesting earlier about Jung as a real doctor in the old way. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. I think that in his time there were still the doctors, the general doctors, were not died out, who knew psychological approaches to patients as well as religious problems or so, and had a word for a patient who had stomach aches or something. But in his time, in Jung's time, one started to have specialists, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? I mean, surgery was coming up, for instance, which hadn't been done so much as it is now. But and I think that when he became a psychiatrist, he must have felt that the soul as it is, and a psychological or a psychotic process, has a goal, an aim. And then he started investigating around philosophy and theology too.
Nowadays, one doesn't find that kind of roundedness in most physicians.
There are still some.
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
really. But we live in a very technical life. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the blood pressure is measured, and when it goes down and goes up right away again after it's measured, I don't think they really take into consideration emotions and as the old people did, as even in antiquity. Old Greek doctors also knew that you run a temperature when you are very emotional about something. And now we put the temperature down with an antibiotic or something, and we don't really, this is why we do have to have psychotherapists. It's true. My father, for instance, always said that children, when they have a flu, they have the right to be to themselves, run a temperature, and let things, impressions, simmer down, to be in their room and in their bed.
To have a good introverted
Yes,
time.
they never get it otherwise. It's true.
What are some of your feelings about the women's liberation movement? Is that going on here in Switzerland? Are younger women?
Yes, of course. There are large movements, but in our country, I sometimes feel women were freer when the law didn't prescribe all their freedom. In a way, don't you think so? And women were always stronger than men are. This is not to be heard by men, but I think it is their personal problem when they feel dominated by masculine world or so, or by their husbands or so. You lend yourself to certain projections, you lend yourself to what you then think is a tyranny or so. Sometimes I feel it's kind of an escaping.
To focus on being the victim of a man's world, you mean?
Yeah, why do we have to live the man's world? We have a very rich world of our own.
Well, if you're a mother of 10 children, you don't have a lot of time to develop yourself. So, I mean, the coming of birth control, what do you think about that? As a way of freeing women to have more time.
Yeah, but I think it must be a source for innumerable complications in married lives. And why should, with the pills, again, the woman take all the responsibility? I knew if the unconscious plays them the trick of forgetting those pills for once, and there they are, and they are then responsible.
So you think
but
that
it is difficult. One shouldn't judge from one's own way of life. I mean, of course, we were not living so primitively that a husband wanted so and so many children from you. Of course, there are still societies more primitive where the woman just has to have one child after the other, and that's the whole communication the couple has. But I don't know how they then manage with pills, and you see, they are maybe too primitive then to also regulate that. And what will they be doing with the rest of the time? I don't know.
But for modern Western women, do you think that the psyche is activated in another way, is asking for a new kind of consciousness or development?
Development is always new, and it works by itself. Don't you think so?
Yes, but I was thinking, for example, of Emma Jung and Toni Wolff. They lived a life that perhaps hadn't been lived before in our culture in terms of relating to the psyche. It's a new step that they took.
A more conscious step. But when was always so that ladies of the society, they wrote letters, they were reading, they were taught, they did a lot of cultural work.
So
only one didn't talk about it so much. und didn't.
So there are historical patterns for this kind of consciousness
I'm sure
in women.
they are. Yes, yes. Only it wasn't taught at universities. It was to their own development. Think of, they wrote poetry, lots of poetry. My grandmother was a great photographer, and she had poetry published privately, just a little book where she formulated all her woes and her problems in a way, you know. But the feminine way cannot be, is not so important in the masculine world. It wasn't. It doesn't. You can prescribe the scientific growth of a man, how he, where he studies and what he does, and his professors, and so on, and his degrees, and so. But it doesn't say much about their inner development, for instance. And for women, you cannot prescribe a feminine way, really. Whether you do it with breeding dogs, or having lots of children, or reading a lot, or the woman has always been all round.
What about the different cultures in Europe? It seems to me that there are really very different patterns of life for French women if you compare them to German women or Italian women, that there are real differences in the life of women in those countries. They're all European, and they all have long historical.
Maybe one could say they have the different races have different types. In a way, I think the French, men and women, they spiritually, they are completely, also their language is different. It has different expressions, refined things we can't express in German, and also the English. There are expressions that matter of fact and clear expressions you can never express in German, so precise as you can in English, for instance, or in French. The German language is also elaborate in a way, and you can circumambulate, you know, in a phrase what you really mean. But the English have an expression, an idiom, for instance. And the Italians are, in their approach to life, much different from the French or the English. It's sometimes, I think, it's like 4 different functions.
I see.
A bit.
Well, if you're a Swiss woman, what would be on the opposite side of the wheel in terms of the feminine type? Are the Italian women very different, or would it be the French?
They're especially because I know Italy quite well. And in Italy you could see that women always had their spiritual interests. Always. Always. It depends on what schools you were at. And then they have very, very primitive feminine creatures in Italy. You have another language, to talk another language to them, you know. And so it is, it's most probably also in France and in Germany. But in Italy, the cultural backgrounds are just different, you know.
I mean,
Of the Italians peasants in the south. They also have a very different approach to Christianity. Actually, they, in the far south of Italy, they are pagan, but it is Christian. The way they treat their Easter lambs, that's not to be, it's incredible. They ask those lambs to take the suffering of Christ, which also they take. They suffer much easier than we do. They take life as it is, and they treat those lambs with an incredible cruelty. They sacrifice them. Each family sacrifices a lamb in the home at Easter morning, or Good Friday, or what. No, they have an Easter lamb, which they slaughter themselves in the house. It's very interesting. They are like pagans, but it's intermingled with Christianity. And when you talk to good Catholics of the upper classes, they are free as we Protestants are, you know.
Free?
Free for decisions, for good and evil, or what not, you know.
They have more sense
they
of
needn't go to more, it's a higher level, which in Italy the Catholic Church also allows.
If you could be born again someplace in the world as a woman, where would you like to be born again?
I don't know. I am very adaptable. Really. I like the Mediterranean way of life very much. But on the other hand, I couldn't fit into a modest, primitive Greek family where the wives, the women are not allowed to go out. Also in Sicily, a young girl cannot go alone on the street because men are so primitive. It's like a deer being free. You can, you know, it's different. It's all different from what we are used to, our freedom.
Do you think that working with the psyche is another way of, is a better way of liberating oneself than
But liberating from what?
From
the question then is, what is freedom?
In your own experience that you mentioned earlier, you felt oppressed by this one situation. A woman appeared and seemed to be stepping onto your territory. And Toni Wolff taught you how to...
Yeah, that was one special
respond.
Way. But I think an analyst's wife should know what is going on and what projections mean, you know. If you take it too literally, all they talk about, because I once got a letter which didn't really affect me at all. A patient of my husband's who wrote me about 10 pages, big pages, that to prove that her relationship to my husband was much better than mine. And she hadn't, my husband hadn't kind of there anyway not had a countertransference at all. But her imagination let her feel and think she was actually, would be a better wife for my husband. You know, when patients are in a stage of transferences they need, otherwise they won't work well, because the analyst is a kind of a psychopompous. They must accept him. But their fantasy is incredible. Incredible. And I have seen that too, not in my life, but women that are just rejected by analysts to come too close, that they are not, their fantasy builds up things which are never true, and there have been around Jung such cases, who said they had slept with him. And you know, that fantasy is so real.
So powerful.
And you couldn't even say they lie or they build it up consciously. It happens. So I don't think one should ever believe such personal things patients tell. It's very difficult to know whether it is reality, an outer reality, or whether it's their real inner fantasies and kind of dream world. After all, the whole work of analytical work does not depend on whether one is subject of real love or not between analyst and analysand. And when I once, Jung once told me, showed me an alchemical picture, and I haven't found it any longer. I didn't really ask him which it was. It was a picture where there is the vase hermeticum, you know, where the transformation really happens in. And to one side there was the adept, namely the chemist, the man, and to the other side his soror mystica, what they called it, which would be the anima or the feminine partner. But this, in respect also to the process which is going to happen in their vase hermeticum, there is a fire underneath. And Jung then said, when physical love or even comes in between those adepts and soror mystica, they forget about the fire under the process, and or the fire goes out. It's a preoccupation, a physical one, or the fire goes out, or it burns too much, and what is going to happen in the retorte, in the vase hermeticum, is it can't then happen. They ought to watch the process, which is also a kind of an individuation process.